Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. Now, today I'm looking at a book which I've reviewed before and I use very regularly in court. It's from Oxford University Press and it's the Judicial College Guidelines for the Assessment of General Damages in Personal Injury Cases. It's a very small book, but it's this one here, the Guidelines. There we go. It's actually, it includes guidance on the 10% uplift. It's been published, as I say, by OUP, and there's a foreword by Lord Justice Jackson. Let's have a look at it first. It's very light. You will have seen it in the courts. There is the spine. And then on the back, this is the 13th edition. You will see that there's quite a lot of information. This is the most current one. Going to the back, it's under 100 pages long. The index is quite useful. You should find most of what you're looking for by way of the injuries at the back. The front of the book, that is actually the front page. And you can see there are quite a large number of people who've been involved in producing this issue. I'm very pleased that we have this sort of publication available because it does make a lot of sense in a modern era. That's the introduction. Introductory contents, and then you can see the second part there. Then there's a foreword to the 13th edition by Rupert Jackson, and it's dated the 12th of June 2015. And then the first edition, Lord Donaldson wrote the foreword. If we go into the book itself, you can see there's a new introduction for the 13th edition, which is worth reading. And then there's a note on multiple injuries where you will go a cross between one type of injury and another, and then you start off with death and then you run all the way through. And the way it's now structured, you've got some shaded boxes here. Let me go to orthopaedic, which is the area I'm quite heavily involved in, which is neck injuries. That's the things like whiplash and so forth. You can see how it's structured. You've got the actual amounts of money, which is the range, which is here on, as you're looking at it, it's that side here. It's to my left, but you're right. And likewise, you've got the shaded boxes there, with and without the uplift. Now, this book is very good because obviously it's balanced very much with the case law. But can I say that again, that you will find, I'm sure, and many of you have done these cases, that if you're arguing quantum, quite often the one thing the judge is interested in will not necessarily be the cases that are reflective of the type of facts you've got in your own case, but they're much more interested in the medical opinions that have been expressed and how it will fit in with the level. Because clearly one of the views that is expressed quite openly is that these awards are actually quite low when you look at the overall scheme of things. They're not big awards by any means, but they are satisfactory awards. And of course I deal with a lot of what are called infant approval cases where the liability is not in issue, and then you're dealing actually with injuries to children, normally whiplash because they're passengers and there's been a shunt of some sort. So you can see the type of help that it gives, and this guideline book is really helpful. And I do hope the Judicial College produce other types of publication through OUP in future, because I think it's a great benefit to everybody involved in this work. Now, under the sort of review we've written, which has been sent to the journals and will be in the on the web and everywhere else, my wife Elizabeth and I talked about the book because she's seen the sort of work I do in court, and she's aware of the certainly the types of opinion one writes in terms of advice on quantum. So this book is absolutely helpful. So what do we say about the 13th edition? Well, we say it's a book of guidelines, not tram lines. It's general damages for person injury, and these are the latest guidelines that you've got for this is the beginning of 2016. I would think we will probably have this now for a year or so as a book, and then we'll see what happens with the way in which civil litigation and personal injury actions are going in the next year or so. Now, we say this: is it possible to assess another's pain? And can a price be put on that pain or suffering or loss of amenity by way of compensation. And having perplexed generations of judges in particular, the answers to these questions are obviously going to be qualified or guarded. Help, however, is fortunately to hand in this long established now and highly regarded publication from the Judicial College via the Oxford University Press. Now, from its first edition in 1992 to the latest 13th edition, the aim of this book has been throughout to provide judges and practitioners with authoritative and reliable guidelines on fair and equitable compensation for virtually the full spectrum of personal injuries. That, of course, it has done, and this it continues to do, and we're very grateful. I think on behalf of all practitioners and the Judicial, I'd like to thank everybody involved in this, because it's a deep felt thank you for the fact that this does make our lives a lot easier. Now, as chairman of the editorial committee presiding over this new edition, Mr. Justice Longstaff notes in the introduction, quote, that the approach since the first edition of these guidelines has been to reflect and categorise the awards that courts are actually making as to where the members of the committee felt they ought to be. Well, it's their opinion, of course, and every judge is going to have their own view, but at least we've got some idea of where we're going. So thank you for that. Longstaff goes on. He says, this remains the prerogative of the courts, and that's what I've said earlier about the fact that a district judge, for instance, at the much lower level, is going to look very much at the medical report and make his or her own decision. And that's really the beauty of the flexibility and the discretion which must apply when you've got the overall picture of what's happened in a particular set of facts. Longstaff then goes on. He therefore urges readers to remember that this is a book of guidelines, not of tramlines, which is what I've said in the title. The result, nonetheless, is the presentation within a clear, precise format of a framework by which damages in personal injury cases can be logically assessed based primarily on previous judgments, although it's pointed out that no two cases can ever be alike, and that's, again, the basic theme that I've developed here. The figures updated for this new edition reflect the awards made by the courts in 2013, plus increases that reflect the pace of inflation, which has been pretty low since then, which is basically at a rate of about 3.4%. And those include the decisions of the higher courts, of course, on quantum. These figures incorporate the 10% uplift in general damages recommended by Sir Rupert Jackson and are presented in emboldened type, as I've shown you when we saw the book. The pre-uplift figures, by the way, of comparison are listed again in plain text. There is considerable amount of new material in this new edition, which we're grateful for. For example, head injuries, as distinct from brain injuries, are discussed in Chapter 3, and there is increased emphasis on such areas as minor injuries, ectopic pregnancy and mental anguish. And as all judges involved in hearing PI cases will automatically receive a copy of this book, you'll see it in court anyway. It would seem obvious that no PI lawyer should be without it. I mean, it's something that's fundamental. Certainly in early days of practice, for anyone in the civil jurisdiction as barristers, I think it's something they should know about, and certainly either buy a copy, it's very cheap, and certainly have it available in their chambers. Certainly for anyone professionally involved in calculating quantum, the purchase of this slim, succinct and I think necessary volume should be considered an absolute necessity. And the publication date, of course, is cited at 2015, so we're reflecting a little bit back with the awards. But can I just say that in fact it is a guideline, and these guidelines haven't changed that much. This is the book again. There's the back. You see some detail there. Just opening it in the middle again. I've gone to orthopaedic injuries again. You can see how it's sort of organised. Injuries to the pelvis and hips. Now, this book isn't for the squeamish because it covers just about everything. It covers a lot of things. I mean, I've done a number of scarring cases, for instance. This is males very severe scarring, and likewise, and of course for females, I had one particular case. It's again, there are different levels because of the appalling disfigurement that can happen in some of these cases, just from trivial accidents quite often as well. Then things like injuries involving paralysis, and I mentioned also the brain and head injuries there. I'd like to thank everybody, as I say, very much for producing this, and to OUP for continuing to publish it. It's a first-class book, and it's something that, it's not a question of should we or shouldn't we. If you're doing this sort of work, you must have it. So thank you to all concerned, and good luck with your cases. Bye-bye.